Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Nonhlanhla Mtshali. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center, and it is broadcast by Phakama Research and Development. You are welcome to interact with us through our WhatsApp number, which is 063 629 3655. I will repeat the number again. It is 063 629 3655. Please remember, this is just a text line number, so you are only allowed to send text messages. Do not send videos and do not send voice messages. So today's topic of life sciences is on homeostasis in humans. That is what we are going to do today. Before we start, let us look at what do we need to know according to our exam guideline. So with homeostasis, you need to know what homeostasis is. That's number one. So we need to know what the process of homeostasis is and the conditions within the cell that brings about homeostasis. We also need to know what is known as the feedback mechanism. This is the second point. And the feedback mechanism, it's how the body controls the following: the thyroxine level, blood glucose levels, blood carbon dioxide levels, water. And over and above that, we also need to know the disorders that are caused by the imbalance of the following, which is the thyroxine and the glucose. Also, under negative feedback mechanism, you also need to know what thermoregulation is and the role of negative feedback mechanism when it comes to in thermoregulation or in controlling the temperature in the body. So everything that I've just mentioned, you will find in your exam guideline. Then, I said earlier when I started that what you need to know is what homeostasis is. So here we are looking at what is homeostasis. When we talk about homeostasis, we are talking about the process in the body, the process of maintaining a constant internal environment. Remember, there are a lot of activities that are taking place in our bodies. We breathe, we exercise, there's food that is coming in, there's carbon dioxide that we take out, there's oxygen that we take in, and everything that takes place in the body, there's an acceptable normal level. So things should not be in excess, they also should not be under the required amount. So what helps the body to maintain those normal levels of everything that is taking place in the body? It is the process called homeostasis. So we maintain an internal environment within the narrow limits, and this maintenance is despite the changes that are taking place. Whatever is taking place outside your body or internally should not affect this internal body environment, it should be maintained at all times. And when we refer to the internal body environment, we are referring to your blood, we are referring to the tissue fluid. So the diagram that you see here, it shows the arteries and the blood vessels. At the top here is the artery, and at the bottom here is the vein. The blood in the arteries, this is part of the internal environment. And then the fluid that is found between the cells, it is what we call the tissue fluid. So there's two things: the blood, the tissue fluid. These two things are what we refer to as our internal environment. So this is where everything should be at a acceptable level. So how does then your body maintain this constant internal environment, this homeostasis? It does this through a mechanism that is called negative feedback mechanism. So there's two things mentioned here, three: environment, and now what brings about homeostasis is this mechanism that is called negative feedback mechanism. Body, by doing what? If there's a change in the internal environment, it is detected. And that change, when it is detected, it can be an imbalance. If change is detected, your internal environment is no longer balanced. So they
are responsible for your own life. No matter how old you are responsible for the things that are currently happening in your life right now. Nobody's going to push you to become a better student. Nobody's going to push you to read more, to study more. You are responsible to put in the time necessary so that you can get the results that you want in your life. So today, make sure that you are putting in the work. Make sure that you are responsible in doing everything that you want to do. Because for you to achieve more, you need to put a little bit extra work to what you are doing, and keep on believing and keep on doing, and you will see the success that you want. The road to success, to becoming a successful student, is through commitment. Commitment to studying, commitment to putting in the extra hours in your books. I know it's not going to be easy. Actually, no one said it will be easy. But if you keep pushing and if you keep believing a little more in yourself, then the results will show in your life. Commit and become.
Powerful winds aren't the only deadly force during a hurricane. The greatest threat to life actually comes from the water in the form of storm surge. Storm surge is water from the ocean that is pushed toward the shore by the force of the winds swirling around the hurricane. This advancing surge combines with the normal tides and can increase the water level by 30 feet or more. Storm surge combined with waves can cause extensive damage. It can severely erode beaches and coastal.
Okay, we are back. Sorry about that. I was talking about the hormones being the organic messages that are secreted directly into the blood by the endocrine glands. And I was being specific that these are only secreted by endocrine glands and not exocrine glands. So do remember that. And then I referred back to grade 10 to say when we were doing proteins in grade 10, we did say that hormones are proteins in nature because they've got properties of what? Of proteins. Now, then here we're looking at the difference between the endocrine and the exocrine gland. Just to add on what I've said on the previous slide, that they do not have ducts, they are ductless, so they secrete their secretions directly into the bloodstream. So here, what we are looking at the diagram or the structure of the endocrine gland, and then the hormones that are secreted from here, they go straight into the bloodstream. And then on the other side, we have the exocrine glands. They pour their secretions into ducts, and these open into cavities, whether internally or outside the body. So here, this is an example of a sweat gland. So the gland is there at the bottom, and then the secretions, they move out of the body, the chemical secretions, and this is the skin surface. So this is the difference between the two. The other difference is that endocrine glands, they secrete hormones, and the endocrine glands exocrine glands, they do not secrete hormones. So these are the terms then that you need to know. Then also I'm going to take you through this. This is what we started with in our last presentation here. We looked at the endocrine gland and the different hormones that they produce. So this is just a recap on that. The important hormones and the glands that you need to know. Remember this one, it's not the first time we come across the pituitary gland. We learned about this when we were doing human reproduction. And this is found there. This is the brain, and this blue part here at the bottom, that is what we call the pituitary gland. And this gland secretes the growth hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, the FSH, the LH, and prolactin. So these are all the hormones that are secreted by the pituitary gland. Also in the brain, we have this part which is called the hypothalamus, and its function is to secrete the ADH, the antidiuretic hormone. We are also familiar with this because we did this in grade 11 when we were doing excretion. Then when we go down here around the neck part, we have this gland which is called the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland, its function is to secrete thyroxine. So a hormone from the thyroid gland is called thyroxine. Then when you go down, then we have what is called the adrenal glands. Adrenal glands are found at the top of the kidneys. These yellow ones here at the top of the kidneys on each side, we call them the adrenal glands, and their function is they secrete adrenaline. They also secrete aldosterone. So there's two hormones that are secreted by adrenal glands. Then the green structure over there, this is what we call the pancreas. Remember, earlier I said if pancreas is an exocrine gland, it is also an endocrine gland because it has functions of of being the endocrine and the exocrine, because it secretes hormones, it also secretes pancreatic juices. So when it secretes hormones, the hormones that it secretes are glucagon and insulin. So these, they go straight into the bloodstream. But the pancreatic juices that are secreted by the pancreas, these ones, they go into the small intestine, into the duodenum. They assist in the digestion of food. And then at the bottom there, then we've got the ovaries in the females. Remember, ovaries are found in the female body, and the hormones that are secreted by the ovaries are estrogen and progesterone. And then in the males, we have the testes, and their function is to secrete testosterone. So at the bottom there, just remember that ovaries are in the females and testes are in the males. So these are the glands and their functions. Remember this diagram, you will find it in your Mind the Gap without the labels. And when you study, you can put all the labels as indicated here and write the function of each gland next to the label. You can even add the functions of the hormones that are secreted by these glands. So then let's look at remember I said homeostasis, it has to do with the control of levels of things in your body. One of them, we said it was thyroxine. So let's look at the homeostatic control of thyroxine. Thyroxine is the hormone in the body that is known to play a major role in metabolism, in metabolic rate, in all the reactions that have to do with metabolism. Those are controlled by this hormone, which is called thyroxine. So let's look at how homeostatic control of thyroxine occurs, because yes, sometimes you'll find that there's more thyroxine than what your body needs, or there's less thyroxine than what your body needs. So how is then that imbalance controlled? So here we are looking at when the levels of thyroxine are high. So remember, this gland is the one that is found around the neck. I mean, the gland that produces thyroxine is the one that is found around the neck. It's called the thyroid gland. So that is where thyroxine comes from. So in your body, if it happens that there's more thyroxine than what your cells need, so what happens is the higher amount of thyroxine in the body will be regarded as what? As an imbalance. Remember, I said step one, an imbalance is detected. So in this case, the imbalance is the increased thyroxine level. That is the imbalance that is being detected. Then we said the control center is stimulated when there's an imbalance. So what is the control center? In this case, the control center is the pituitary gland. So this will be the control center. It becomes stimulated. So when it's stimulated, we said control center then stimulates it responds by stimulating the target organ. So how is it going to respond? The pituitary gland, it will respond by producing less TSH. Remember, TSH is a thyroid stimulating hormone. So what it does is it stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. So we have the thyroid stimulating hormone that stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. So how is the pituitary gland going to respond to increased levels of thyroxine? It will produce less TSH. So the less TSH, or the low levels of TSH in the bloodstream, will then stimulate the thyroid gland to do what? To secrete less thyroxine. So then the less thyroxine, then the level of thyroxine in the blood is going to decrease. It's going to go down because of the less TSH. Then when the thyroxine level decreases, then the levels of the thyroxine in the blood is brought back to what? To normal. So again, I'm going to repeat. An imbalance is detected. What is an imbalance? The imbalance is the increased thyroxine level. So this is the imbalance that is detected. Then the control center, which is the thyroid gland, the pituitary gland, is stimulated. When it is stimulated, it responds by secreting what? Less TSH. Then the less TSH goes to the target organ. In this case, the target organ here is the thyroid gland. So the target organ, which is the thyroid gland, will be stimulated to secrete less thyroxine. So this is how the target responds. It responds by secreting less thyroxine. So less thyroxine, it means in the blood there will be less thyroxine, and then the normal or the levels of the thyroxine in the blood will return to normal. So what we see here is half of the negative. It's the negative feedback mechanism. We start with the normal levels. That we should be here all the time. Your body should be here at the normal levels of thyroxine. So if it goes up, pituitary gland secretes less TSH. Less TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete less thyroxine. Therefore, level of thyroxine in the blood decreases. Then we are back to normal. So this is how the negative feedback mechanism works. So this part that we're looking at, it's when there's increased levels. So what happens when there's less levels of thyroxine in the blood? So if there's decreased levels of thyroxine in the blood, same things take place. Imbalance, control center, target organ, response, imbalance is restored. So it's the same thing, same target organs, same control center. So here an imbalance now is the lower level of thyroxine in the blood. Again, the control center, which is the pituitary gland, it will be stimulated. When it gets stimulated, it will produce more TSH this time. More, because we need to bring the level from low to normal. At first, we needed to bring it from up there to normal. Now we bring it from low to normal. So we've got more TSH in the blood, and the more TSH in the blood means the thyroid gland is going to secrete more thyroxine. Then the more thyroxine, then it means the level of thyroxine in the blood, it increases, it goes where it is required to be, which is it returns to normal. Then here is just a schematic representation of what was mentioned in the steps. So you see that if you know those 7 steps initially, here they are. Now we are being specific to the level of thyroxine. So if you know what we've mentioned earlier, then you will be able to answer any question that you come across. So then we looked at the level of thyroxine. Okay, remember I said when we started, what you also need to know are the disorders that are caused by over or under secretion of the hormones. Then here, these are the disorder that is caused by the over-secretion of the thyroxine. So if there's more thyroxine in your blood and your body cannot respond to that, because remember, if there's high thyroxine, your body should be able to bring it back to normal. But if your body cannot do that, then it results into a disorder that is called gout or hyperthyroidism. It is called gout. And how is it characterized? A person who has gout, you see with the gland on the neck here, the gland, which is the thyroid gland, this one, it swells, it becomes swollen, and then when you look from the outside, this is what you're going to see. So this picture represents a person who has gout. Again here, when you look at this area here, indicates that this person has gout. So the thyroid gland is not functioning normally. So there's more thyroxine than what is needed. So the symptoms here will be increased metabolic rate, increased cardiovascular activities, increased anxiety, and the swollen thyroid gland in the neck. So then this is when we did the micronutrients, macro and micronutrients in grade 10, remember we were taught about iodine, that the deficiency in the iodine leads to the malfunctioning of the thyroid gland or the enlargement of the thyroid gland. So then this is a disorder, one of the disorders that is caused when there's over-secretion of the thyroxine. So let's look at the questions, just a question so that we check our understanding. This question, it talks about the outbreak of thyrotoxicosis. Yes, remember, if it is not mentioned in the exam guideline, you will get a full story of what the disorder is. So this is not in our exam guideline, because in the exam guideline, you only need to know 2 things, gout and diabetes. So because this is not there, hence it is accompanied with this story here, so that you understand fully what thyrotoxicosis is, so that you are able to answer the questions. So what is this? It is a medical condition that is caused by high levels of thyroxine in the blood. So here we are told that there was a sudden increase in the number of reported cases on this condition in one city. And they suspected that it was due to people eating ground beef, that is mincemeat, from a local butcher. So the butcher added the thyroid glands of cattle when he produced the ground beef. Some people who ate the ground beef showed symptoms of increased heart rate, excessive sweating, and weight loss. And when doctors conducted an investigation to determine if the ground beef caused the thyrotoxicosis, you can see, you know what it is. The normal thyroxine levels of 5 volunteers were measured. They were then given cooked ground beef from the butchery to eat. Then the thyroid concentration was measured every 4 hours on day 1 and then once a day for the next 23 days. So then the average thyroxine levels were calculated and recorded, and the results are shown on this graph here. So we have the outbreak of the condition, and then the investigation was conducted. 5 volunteers were there, then measurements were taken in 1 day and then for the next 23 days. So when you look at the graph, as you can see the heading, it says it's the average concentration of thyroxine in the volunteers after eating cooked ground beef containing the thyroid gland. Then we've got the average, and on the x-axis we've got days. On the y-axis it's the average concentration. So the first question says, give the average normal thyroxine concentration in micrograms per deciliter in the blood of the volunteers. So when we look at the graph here, there, you see there, that point over there where there's 5. So this is the average. This is where, because it starts there, even when it comes back down to normal, it goes back to where? To 5. So I would say that the answer for the average is 5 micrograms per deciliter. So let's see if that's our correct answer. Yes, the answer is 5 micrograms per deciliter. And then you see the allocation of marks here, it's on 5 because you were given this in the question. So there's no need for you to rewrite this because it was in the question. But if it was not in the question, then your answer would have been 1 mark for this and 1 mark for the unit, or everything is 1 mark including the unit. So it's 5 micrograms per deciliter. Then the second question is still the same question. It says calculate the percentage increase. Calculate the percentage increase of the average thyroxine concentration in the first 8 hours after eating the ground beef. So when you look at the graph, remember we said the measurements were taken every 4 hours in day 1. And then after that, it was taken once for the next 23 days. So here, initially, this is hours for day 1. So this represents the first day. And then the rest, it's days, day 4, 8, up until day 24. So you are asked to calculate the percentage increase. Remember, with percentage increase, it's the difference between the two values divided by the initial value times 100. That is very important. So here, the initial value here, or the difference between the two values, because we started at 5, meaning the normal, we can say that the normal or the average thyroxine level was 5. And then it increased, remember it says after 8 hours. And when we look at the graph, the 8 hours is over there. So the 8 hours, although this is not a straight line, it is in line with the 25 there at the top. So we take the difference between 25 and 5 and we divide by the initial value. The initial value in this case is 5. So we're looking at 25 minus 5 divided by 5 and multiplied by what? By 100. So this is how the percentage increase is calculated, and you should get the answer. So let's see what I've given you now, whether it is correct or not. Okay, then there you are. So it's the last value, which is 25 there at the top. It increased up to 25, but we started at 5 here. And then we divide everything by the initial value, which is 5. Then we multiply by 100, and the answer here is 400%. So the increase percentage was 400%. But remember, because when you will be in class having the paper in front of you, you have your ruler, then you are able to measure. So here there were 2 options given, because It can be 25, but if you put your 8 here, your ruler up there, it looks like it is also on 24. So that is why two options were given here. Either it's 25 or 24, but the way of calculation is still the same. Then the next question says, then explain why thyrotoxicosis causes weight loss. Why does it cause weight loss? Remember we said, if functional thyroxine and control metabolic activities in the body. And it cellular respiration, for example. When cellular respiration takes place, your body uses glucose to produce energy. So if there's increased thyroxine, because this thyrotoxicosis causes increased thyroxine levels. So if there's a high thyroxine in your body, it means there's a high metabolic rate. Your body is processing this glucose very fast. The glucose in the body is used up. There's no way that it is stored. So if it is used up, it means there's nothing to store. There's no glycogen, there's no fat. Therefore, what is going to happen? You're going to lose weight because your thyroid gland is working over time. Your cells are working over time with all the level of thyroxine that is in the body. So the explanation of causing weight is because increased thyroxine levels, they increase metabolic rate activities, they increase cellular respiration, more glucose is used, therefore there's loss of weight. So let's look at the answer. So here we are told that the increase in thyrotoxicosis causes increased metabolic rate or increased cellular respiration, therefore more glucose is used, less glucose is stored. And if there's no more glucose, remember your body starts breaking down the fat because there's no longer glucose in the body. So fat is broken down and this causes weight loss. So this is the answer. It's 3 points, but there's 4 ticks here. But remember, it's any 3 points that are correct. So this increases metabolic rate because of increased thyroxine, more glucose is used, less glucose is stored, fat is broken down, causing weight loss. Then the other question says then, explain the expected concentration of TSH in the blood 8 hours after eating the ground beef. So again, the focus is here on 0 to 12, which is the first day. Explain the expected concentration of TSH. Remember, the fact that there's high thyroxine, it means there's also high TSH because TSH stimulates, remember, TSH, it stimulates the secretion of what? Of thyroxine. And we said that if this is high, it means this is also going to be what? To be high. But if there's less TSH in the blood, it means also there's going to be what? Less thyroxine that is secreted because the thyroid stimulating hormone stimulate the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. So here, what is going to happen to the TSH concentration at 8 hours? Remember, at 8 hours, this is where the level of thyroxine in the blood is the highest. So it means when we explain, the TSH is also what? Is also high. So there's high level of thyroxine in the blood causing the pituitary gland. Then the pituitary gland does what? Because there's high. The pituitary gland will then stimulate the high levels of thyroxine. There is an imbalance. So when that imbalance is stimulated, the pituitary gland is then informed to do what? To secrete less TSH so that less thyroxine is released. So this is the answer that is expected there. So high levels of thyroxine in the blood, they cause the pituitary gland to secrete less TSH into the blood, causing the level of TSH to do what? To decrease. So here we are describing this negative feedback mechanism that we are talking about. If there's high this, then there will be high this. So if there's high this will then stimulate the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland will then secrete less of that so that there's less thyroxine. Then the metabolic rate is brought back to its normal state. Then this is another question. Here the question is, describe the feedback mechanism that occurs when the thyroxine level in the blood is high. We are taken back to the steps that we did earlier where we said high thyroxine is what? This is an imbalance. And then the high thyroxine then stimulates the what? The pituitary gland. And then the pituitary gland does what? It secretes less TSH. Then we said less TSH will then tell the thyroid gland to secrete less what? Less thyroxine. And then less thyroxine, then there will be less thyroxine in the blood, and then the imbalance is restored. So let's look at the answer. Pituitary gland is stimulated, less TSH is secreted, low level of TSH causes the thyroid gland to secrete less thyroxine, therefore thyroxine levels return to normal. So then this is the explanation. This is a straightforward question, so it's easy marks here because it's just ask you describe. There is no story behind. You are not asked to apply. You're just giving the information as you know it from what you were taught in class. Then a person has a medical condition that results in the under secretion of thyroxine. Explain why this person will gain weight. Remember, high thyroxine level increases metabolic rate, more glucose is used up, more fat is broken down so that there's more glucose, therefore you lose weight or you are able to maintain your weight. But if there's less thyroxine, it means there's less metabolic activities. Less metabolic activities, it means there's more glucose is not used up, so that glucose then is stored as fat, as glycogen. Therefore, it will lead to weight gain. So let's see. The rate of metabolism and respiration will become less, will decrease, less glucose will be broken down, and more glucose will be converted to fat, glycogen. Therefore, this will lead to gain weight. And then the next one is the homeostatic control of blood glucose. So what happens here with the blood glucose? Remember, levels of glucose also shouldn't be too high, not too low, but we want a normal glucose level in the body for the body to function. So when does glucose levels normally increase? After food. After you've eaten, your glucose will rise up. And your body knows that when it rises up, then something must come to bring it down so that it goes back to normal. So each time you eat, your glucose level is going to go up, but it does not stay like that because then your body has a way of controlling that and bringing it back to normal. So here, the organ or the gland that plays a major role here is the pancreas. So here, what you look when you in this diagram, there is the pancreas that secretes the two hormones that control the glucose in the blood. That is insulin and glycogen. So we talk about two hormones here, glucagon, and insulin. See the mistake that I've made? This is the mistake that you also do at the end of the year. Remember, glucagon is a hormone. Glycogen is a form of stored glucose in the liver and in the muscle cells. So there's two things. Glycogen is stored glucose. Glucagon is a hormone. So pancreas plays a role in controlling the levels of glucose in the blood through the two hormones, glucagon and insulin. So what happens here? When the levels of glucose increase in the blood, this usually after you've eaten, if there's high glucose, high blood glucose, or high levels of glucose in the blood, this is the imbalance. Remember, the imbalance is the increased levels of sugar. So this imbalance will then stimulate the control center. The control center in this case is the pancreas. The control center will be stimulated. When it's stimulated, it secretes what? Insulin. So the control center will secrete insulin. As soon as this insulin hits or gets into the bloodstream, it starts working by stimulating the uptake, stimulate the muscles to absorb more glucose, stimulates the liver to convert this glucose into what? Into glycogen, so that it can be stored in the body. Because remember, we're not supposed to excrete glucose. If you excrete glucose, then there's something wrong with you. We'll learn about that later. So if there's more glucose in the body, your body tries by all means to reserve this glucose. So it will store it, but it cannot be stored in its form as glucose because it dissolves easily. So it must be converted first into glycogen, and then once it is glycogen, then this is when your body can do what? Can store it. So all of that is how it's the negative feedback mechanism to control the blood glucose level. So we said high levels, just focus on the red lines here. The red lines from here up until there, they are when there's high glucose in the blood. So after eating, this increases. The control center, which is the pancreas, is stimulated. Once it is stimulated, it secretes more insulin, or insulin is poured into the bloodstream. Then the insulin, what I want to say is once the insulin is in the blood, then it means your muscle cells or cells will increase their uptake of what? Of glucose. Also at the same time, insulin is going to stimulate that the liver stores this glucose into what? Into glycogen in the liver. Then this lowers the level of glucose in the blood. So then it's brought back to normal. So we said the pancreas detects an increase in the blood. It releases the hormone called insulin. Then the insulin causes glucose to be converted to glycogen. Glycogen is stored in the liver and in the muscles. Then the body cells are also stimulated to take up glucose. Then this lowers the glucose in the blood and it returns it to normal. So what happens when then there's low glucose? When there's low glucose, now we're looking at the green. Previously, we were looking at the red for the increase. Now we're looking at the green. So now the imbalance is low sugar levels. Low sugar levels, which is an imbalance. Again, this pancreas is what is stimulated. When the pancreas gets stimulated, what does it do now? It secretes a hormone called glucagon. Glucagon does what? Remember, with the high levels, glucose was stored as glycogen. But now with the low levels, your body needs glucose because it's less. So what does the glucagon do? It stimulates glycogen it stimulates the breakdown of glycogen now from here to here. This is what it does. So the glycogen that was stored is broken down so that it becomes glucose so that your cells will be able to respire and produce energy. So this then raises the blood sugar level. Then it goes back to normal. So it's the opposite of what we said earlier. Still, the control center is one, which is the pancreas. This control center secretes glucagon. Glucagon converts glycogen to glucose in the muscles, in the liver, and then this increases the level of glucose. It returns it to normal, and then this is stored in the body. Then, it is used up during cellular respiration. So here, what we're looking at the feedback mechanism, what I've just explained earlier in the schematic representation, because what we want is this. What your body wants to work perfectly is for this to be normal. This is what we want. So the top part here is when there's an increase. The bottom part here is when there's a decrease. So an increase brings about insulin, glucose to glycogen, levels decrease. A decrease brings about the secretion of glucagon, glycogen to glucose, and the level is what? Is increased. Then remember the disorders. If there's a disorder that is caused by high blood glucose levels, then that disorder is what we call diabetes mellitus. It is caused when there's high blood glucose levels. So this means that your body is no longer able to convert excess glucose to glycogen. It can't do that anymore. Either your body cannot produce enough insulin, or the insulin is there, but your cells do not respond to this insulin. So the symptoms, remember, of diabetes are the same for both, whether there's under secretion or over secretion or no response. It's the same. High, but whether there's response or no response, but there's high levels. It's fatigue, wounds that do not heal or they heal very slowly, excessive thirst, high blood sugar, weight loss, frequent urination, and obviously your eyesight is affected. We talk about the blurry vision. So these are symptoms of diabetes mellitus. There's two types of diabetes mellitus. We've got type 1 and there's also type 2. type 1 is an inherited disorder. It is there, and it is also caused when your pancreas can no longer secrete insulin. So there's no insulin in your body because the pancreas or the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas cannot secrete the insulin. So again, the treatment for this is the lifelong. It requires daily injections of insulin into the blood. So people who suffer from type 1 diabetes, you find that they inject themselves daily with the insulin so that insulin helps with controlling the level of glucose in the blood. And then we also have what is called type 2 diabetes. This is when the body, remember the first one we said it is inherited, or it is because the cells can no longer produce insulin. Whereas type 2 is brought by our lifestyle. So if you are a person who lives on fast food, you don't exercise, overweight, and all those things, then that can lead to type 2 diabetes. Here again, it is either your cells do not produce insulin, or even if it does produce insulin, your cells can no longer respond because they're being overworked. Imagine the amount of sugar that is processed all the time because of the high amount of fats that you eat. So this is a result of pure lifestyle. Again, treatment here, you maintain a balanced diet, you exercise regularly, and you take your medication. So these two are just the diagrams showing the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. We'll just look at one question now because our time is not on our side. This is a question on the glucose content, the effect of glucose concentration on insulin production before and after a meal, and it was measured in a healthy person over a period of 2.5 hours. So when you look at the graph here, we have the concentration on the y-axis, and here at the bottom, then it's the time taken for this to take place. So the graph shows the effect of glucose consumption on the concentration of insulin. Then the solid line at the top represents glucose, and then the dotted line represents the levels of insulin. We can already see that when the glucose levels are at 60, it's normal. The level of insulin is also there at the bottom. But when the level of glucose rises, insulin does what? It also rises. And then when it goes down, insulin also goes down. So the question is here, during which period of time was the person's blood glucose level constant? During which period? So when you look at the graph from 7, I think, until 8:15, that is when we will say it was at a level constant. And then the question is, what is the glucose level of blood at 9? Okay, we said from 7 to 8. At 9, again, when you look at the graph, at 9, when you do this dotted lines going up, at 9, you can say, although this is not on paper, but it's somewhere at 90, 91, or just below 90. Then the answer is it's 93 per milliliter. So it's 93 milligram per milliliter. Then describe the homeostatic control. Describe the homeostatic control after eating. Remember, after eating, levels go up. When they are up, insulin is produced. When the insulin is produced, stimulates the conversion of glucose to glycogen. Then glycogen is stored, and then levels are brought down. So let's see, after eating breakfast, breakfast, glucose level increase, pancreas secretes insulin into the blood. Insulin stimulates the absorption of glucose, stimulates the conversion of glucose into glycogen, and this is stored in the liver, and then the levels are brought back to normal. And then if a person is diabetic, describe the changes in the insulin level if this person was diabetic and untreated. So then it means if you are diabetic, then the insulin levels after eating a meal will not rise. They will stay the same. And if it stays the same, then nothing is going to change. Your body will not be able to convert this glucose into glycogen. So we are not going to look at this question, but remember your teachers do have this presentation. Then they can go through this in class. It will then help you to understand more about glucose and the levels of glucose in the blood. And then we are quickly going to look at the control of carbon dioxide in the blood. Remember, there's increased levels of glucose or low levels. Also, carbon dioxide that we take out, that is a product of cellular respiration, it is not needed in the blood because more of carbon dioxide in your blood, it interferes with the pH of the blood. So then it means most of the processes or reactions that take place will be affected. So here, when we look at the carbon dioxide, if there's increased, the stimulus is the increased carbon dioxide levels. If there's an increase in the carbon dioxide levels, this will impact on the pH. It will also impact on the oxygen. So here, more carbon dioxide, what does it do? The receptors will then detect that there's more carbon dioxide because the pH will be lowered. It means the pH will be lowered, and then if it's lowered, then the control center, in this case, the control center is in the medulla of oblongata. The control center is then going to stimulate the muscles, your intercostal muscles, the respiration muscles, intercostal muscles, the diaphragm, so that the rate of breathing is increased. Remember, when you exercise, you start breathing fast. That is because there's more carbon dioxide in your body, and that carbon dioxide must be exhaled. You need to take it out. So when you do that, it is because your brain has detected that there's more carbon dioxide. So when it does that, the medulla oblongata is stimulated. Messages go into your muscles, the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. Then your heart rate and your breathing rate is increased. When that is increased, it means you exhale more carbon dioxide. And then the levels, the blood carbon dioxide levels falls, the pH returns to normal. Remember here, it's the pH that must be normal. So if there's more carbon dioxide, it disturbs the pH. So it's the pH that must be normal so that the body can continue to function. So increased carbon dioxide levels after exercise, the receptors in the carotid artery and the walls of the aorta are stimulated. Messages, they go to the medulla oblongata, which stimulates the breathing muscles, which are your muscles, intercostal, diaphragm, and then more carbon dioxide is exhaled and the levels of pH it's brought back to normal. And these are the steps like we did earlier. Carbon dioxide increases, receptors detect the change, impulses go to the medulla, medulla stimulates breathing muscles, intercostal and diaphragm of the heart, and then the muscles contract more actively, increased heart rate, increased breathing rate, more CO2 is taken out, and then the level of carbon dioxide is lowered, then the pH is brought back to normal. We are not going to look at the questions because of the time, but remember, do go through these questions in class with your teacher. Just remind them that we need to go through these questions so that you get a further understanding. So now I'm going to give over to Sina to do the last part of today's presentation, still on homeostasis. Thank you very much for being with us.
Right, welcome back and good afternoon. My name is Sina Sefeche. I will be continuing with homeostasis where Sis Nonhlanhla left. So, as she was explaining, she was talking about homeostasis played by the role that is played by the body, different types of the body in maintaining the internal balance. So, for this section, we are going to look at the kidney. The kidney, we know it as a structure that plays a role in homeostasis. So right now we're going to look at all the functions that the kidney does in all the roles that the kidney plays in homeostasis. So let us look at the kidney. So when you check the structure there, it is actually the structure of a nephron. Remember, the nephron is the functional unit of a kidney. So this is where all the functioning of the kidney takes place. So we're going to see what role does the kidney play. So the kidney plays various functions in maintaining homeostasis. So the first one that we're going to look at is the regulation of water level, which is called osmoregulation. So the kidney plays a very important role in osmoregulation. It also plays a role in maintaining the pH of the blood, also the regulating salt in the blood. So there are three things that the kidney does in maintaining balance. So when you take, let's recap the structure of the nephron. When you take a look at the structure here on your left, this structure here, you can remember from grade 11, you studied your nephron and it starts with your Bowman's capsule, your glomerulus there. Remember your glomerulus, it has your afferent and your efferent arterioles, which branches into these arteries there on top of your renal tubules. And then you have your distal convoluted tubule. It is this tubule right over here on your right. So we will be talking more about this tubule on this lesson. So please remember it. Remember where it is situated on your nephron. And then also the collecting duct. These two, the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, are going to play a very important role in checking how does the kidney maintain balance of the substances or the hormones that we are going to mention. But when you check also on your left here, you find your proximal convoluted tubule, which we are going to talk about later when we talk about other substances. But just for recap purposes, please remember this structure over here. And then here, this pin-like looking structure is your loop of Henle. So the loop of Henle also plays a very important role in maintaining the salt balance. So we'll look at that later. But for now, please take note of the distal convoluted tubule and also the collecting duct and your efferent arterioles, as they will be playing a role in maintaining the substances that we shall look at later. So the first one that we're going to start with is the regulation of water. The homeostatic control of water and salt levels in the blood tissue is known as osmoregulation. Osmoregulation is when the kidney is now controlling the water and salt levels in the blood and in the tissue fluid. Remember, it was mentioned earlier that when we maintain the internal balance, we're talking about the blood and the tissue fluid. So osmoregulation is when we maintain the water and the salt levels in the kidneys. Now, water, you must check. Remember, it was mentioned that you need to check the hormone, you need to check the receptors, you need to check the target organs, and you need to check the response on how balance is maintained. So for water, we will be talking about hormone ADH. This is your antidiuretic hormone. This hormone plays a very important role in maintaining the water balance in the body. So it is produced in the hypothalamus, but it is secreted by the pituitary gland. As you recapped where the structure of the pituitary gland before, and also the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus will be your receptor that is detecting or stimulating the secretion of this hormone by the pituitary gland. So let us look at how all of this work in action. So remember, balance is maintained in negative feedback. So there are always two scenarios all the time. There is normal to high or normal to low. So these two scenarios, you must check what happens when the body detects a high stimulus or low, because everything must always be maintained at normal levels. So when you look at your diagrams for negative feedback or how the body maintains balance, you must always start where it says normal. So from your normal levels, you must go either high above normal, or you must go low or way low below normal. So with water, let us look at this diagram over here, so we can see how does the body or how does the kidney maintain the water balance. So we're going to start with a normal water balance. So this is the block over here. So in this block, you see that there was normal water potential in the blood. Remember, everything is in the blood, not in the body. So when there's normal, then something happens, we don't know, and then the water potential of blood decreases, meaning the whole blood becomes salty. There is less blood, there's less water in your blood. Then what is going to happen? The osmoreceptors, please check this word, osmo, like osmoregulation. So the receptors that are going to pick this up, they are going to detect that there is an imbalance in your body, meaning there is no water in your blood, or there is less water in your blood is salty. The osmoreceptors are the ones that are going to detect this, and they are going to send the message to the hypothalamus. And then when you check, the hypothalamus is there, that part in your brain there, and then that the osmoreceptors are in the hypothalamus. They are going now to stimulate the pituitary gland, this one. Please take note here. The hypothalamus is not the one under the influence of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is going to send impulses to the pituitary gland to secrete hormone ADH. Now, here's our hormone, antidiuretic hormone. So as the pituitary gland secretes our antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, our ADH is now going to be released, and it is going to now go to our target organ. Where is it going to work? It is going to travel in the bloodstream to, remember the part that I said you must remember, or you must take note of. The ADH is going to increase the permeability of the distal convoluted tubule. So this part over here, this is where now your ADH is going to come and act. When it comes here, it is going to allow the walls of this distal convoluted tubule to become more permeable. And then when they become more permeable, it means more water is going to be retained back into the capillaries. Remember, there are capillaries here all over our nephron. So the ADH is going to cause our distal convoluted tubule to become more permeable, allowing water to be reabsorbed into the bloodstream, therefore leaving our blood with more water. Now there will be more water in the blood, thus maintaining the balance of water in our blood. But there can be another scenario where you find that we're coming now to the bottom. The water potential of the blood increases, meaning there is more water in the blood, meaning your blood is too watery, and we don't want that. Remember, we need to maintain the balance. So when this happens, this is going to be detected by the osmoreceptors also in the hypothalamus. Remember, we said the osmoreceptors are the ones that are going to detect, and then when they detect, they are going to send the message to the pituitary. Now, what does it tell the pituitary? The opposite of what happened at the top. They are going to now stimulate the pituitary gland to release less ADH. We don't want more ADH. We don't want our blood vessels to be more permeable. So our blood vessels here, our distal convoluted tubule here, when you come here, it is going to be impermeable to water, meaning it is going to retain water. So more water will be lost through the collecting duct, and then less water is going to be reabsorbed into the capillaries. So our urine will therefore be dilute, because more water will be lost through urination, but no water will be reabsorbed back into the blood. Right. So when you look here, these are the steps that you can find in Mind the Gap that shows you like the simplified steps of what is happening. If you follow it, you will be able to remember. Now, step one, when the blood has less water than normal. So there are two scenarios. This is the first scenario where now there is no water, or there is less water in the blood. So what is your body going to do? The same thing that we've just spoken about, but now it is written in sentences that you need to understand. Right. First step is that there is going to be an imbalance. Okay, the blood has less water than normal. We don't want this. Then what is going to happen? the hypothalamus is going to be stimulated, and then this is going to send a message to the pituitary gland to secrete more ADH. What you need to remember with all of these processes, please remember the hormones, the target organs, or as mentioned before, so that when you write your steps, because the steps are the same. This is the skeleton that you just need to feed with information regarding the process that you are talking about. So here, the pituitary gland is going to secrete more ADH, and then this ADH is going to travel into the blood to the kidneys. And then the ADH, what is it going to do? The ADH is going to increase the permeability of the collecting ducts and the distal convoluted tubule of the kidneys. Why do you want the permeability to be increased? Because we want more water to be reabsorbed and to be passed to the surrounding blood vessels on the kidney. Then the water level will be returned to normal. So this is just what we said in the previous slide, but now more in sentences. Then let us look at what happens when there is more water than normal in your blood. Same thing. Blood has more water than normal. We don't want that. Then the hypothalamus is going to be stimulated. Same thing. And then you know which receptors. The osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus, because we are dealing with water here. And then these are going to send impulses to the pituitary gland, but now they're going to send a different message. The message here is to stop secreting ADH because we have more water. So we don't want ADH because we don't want our ducts to be more permeable. Okay? It is going to send impulses to the pituitary gland to stop secreting ADH or to secrete less ADH. Then no ADH or less ADH is going to travel to the kidneys, and then the collecting duct and the distal convoluted tubules are going to become less permeable. Now the key here is less ADH, meaning we have less permeable or less permeability of our tubules, the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Now less water is then reabsorbed because these are less permeable, meaning no water will be coming out of them into the capillaries. So less water is reabsorbed and passed to the surrounding blood vessels, and then more water is now lost. Hence we say we're going to have now dilute urine. So the urine will be concentrated more with water, and then the water level then does maintaining or returning to normal. So that is our water, how the kidney works. So remember, just to recap, we're talking about the kidney, the nephron. Then you remember which parts are responsible for reabsorption of water, and then which hormone is also responsible for that. So the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct are the two main parts that play a role in the reabsorption of water. But they also act under the influence of hormone, antidiuretic hormone. So when there is less ADH, it means less permeability of those two parts. But if there's more ADH, it means there's more permeability. ADH allows for controls the permeability of the renal tubules, the ones that we have mentioned. Right. So this is another diagram that you can look at, because in the exam, you're going to find different diagrams. You're going to find different interpretations of this. So you must be able to interpret any one. So let us look at this one. How can you interpret this one for the regulation of water? So it's the same thing that we've been doing ever since we started, but you start here at your normal level. Remember, everything needs to start from normal. And then something that is not wanted needs to happen, where an imbalance needs to happen, whether there's more or there's less. So in this case, you follow the arrows. Remember, in negative feedback, there are always two scenarios. The one that is above normal, the one that is below normal. So there is no negative feedback if it's just one scenario. So you need to follow your arrows and check what is happening in the above scenario. Follow the arrows also to check what is happening in the bottom scenario. It is actually the opposite. That is why it is negative feedback. Now, let us follow these arrows here. This person here had normal water levels in the blood, and then something happened, the water level decreased. So the water level decreased, and remember, it is not written here, but you must remember, once this water level decreases, something must detect this. So you will remember that your osmoreceptors are the ones that are going to detect this imbalance, meaning this decrease. The osmoreceptors, you find them in your hypothalamus, and then they are going to send a message to the pituitary gland to secrete more ADH. So when there's less water, we need more ADH. So the pituitary gland is going to be stimulated to secrete ADH, and then this ADH is now going to act. It is going to act on the distal and collecting duct and the distal convoluted tubule. What is it going to tell them to do, or what effect is it going to have on those two tubules? It is going to increase the permeability of their walls. Why do we need that permeability to be increased? You know, we need the permeability to increase so that reabsorption can take place, so that the reabsorption of water can take place and water can be reabsorbed back into the capillaries. Then more water is reabsorbed into the blood. Here is your arrow, and then thus maintaining balance or maintaining the normal water levels in the blood. Then when you look at the scenario at the bottom here, is actually the negative. Then this person was normal. They had normal water levels in the blood, and then the water level increased. Now the water level is more than what the body or what should be in the blood. Now this increase is detected by the osmoreceptors again. There are osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus, and they're going to send a message way to the pituitary gland. Now, when there's more water, you check, there's less ADH. Why do you want less ADH, or where is this ADH going to work? This ADH is going to go to the same thing, collecting duct and the distal convoluted tubule. Remember, I said you must memorize those parts because they play a very important role in the kidneys maintaining maintaining homeostasis. Right. So the ADH is going to now do what? Decrease the permeability of the walls of the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Why? Because we want less water to be reabsorbed into the kidneys. Because remember, when we started, we said there's more water. So we don't want more water to be reabsorbed into the capillaries. We actually want less water. So we want more water to go out. So the more water will go out through the collecting duct and have more dilute urine. And then everything is back to normal. But I think with all the diagrams that we have dealt with, we have looked at how the kidney regulates water or maintains the water balance. We have checked as a diagram, we have checked a schematic representation, we've also checked it in words. So you will find a method that works better for you, but it will be best if you equip yourself with all, because you don't know how you're going to be asked this in the exam. Right. So the next one that we're going to look at is how does the kidney maintain the salt balance? When you take a look at this hormone here, you already see it says aldosterone. Aldosterone. Now we are no longer talking about ADH. How did I know now I'm talking about salts? So when you look at this diagram here, over here, the whole of this diagram, remember this is still the nephron, the same nephron that we are talking about in the kidney. So you check, you have your sodium ions. Na plus is a sodium ion. So sodium ion is a salt. So now when you see here, then you see this is now maintaining salt. Remember when I said to you, please look at this part, the proximal convoluted tubule. Then you have your distal convoluted tubule and your loop of Henle. This will be your ascending one. This will be your descending one, the one going down, then the one going up. Then you're going to check where are the sodium ions reabsorbed, because the parts are very important of the nephron. So let us take a look at this process in detail. What happens? Now, it says here, the blood and tissue fluids are affected by the presence of solids, dissolved substances. Sodium and potassium are salts that are found in the body fluids. Sodium is important in the body for good nerve and muscle functioning. So we do need salt for good nerve and muscle functioning. So our body needs to maintain the sodium levels at normal at all times. So let us take a look at what happens, or how does the kidney now play a role in maintaining the balance of salt. We're going to start with one scenario. Remember, negative feedback always works in two scenarios. First one is when the salt level in the blood decreases. So here it means there's less salt. We don't want this. The body does not want this. The body wants normal, wants everything to be maintained constant. So meaning when there is less blood, when there is less salt in the blood, what is going to happen? The salt level in the blood is going to decrease, which we do not want. We don't want a decrease. Remember, we want a balance. What is going to happen? The receptor cells in the afferent and the efferent arterioles. Now the story is different here. Remember with water, we were talking about different things. We were talking about the hypothalamus and the osmoreceptors. But now, the receptors that are going to detect the imbalance of salt, they are actually your afferent and your efferent arterioles in your glomerulus. Remember that first part that I showed you that has two veins coming out? Right, your arteries, sorry. So your afferent and your efferent arterioles are the ones that are going to detect the imbalance of salt. So in this case, they detect that there is less salt in the blood. Now, they are going to do what? They are going to stimulate the adrenal gland. Now, the adrenal gland on top of the kidneys are the ones that are going to be stimulated to secrete a hormone. The adrenal glands are going to be stimulated by this imbalance that is detected by the afferent and the efferent arteriole. Now, the adrenal gland is going to be stimulated to secrete a hormone called aldosterone. Now, aldosterone is the hormone that is responsible for the salt balance or the maintaining of the salt balance. And it is secreted by the adrenal glands. And remember where your adrenal glands are? When you were doing your homeostasis, you checked all the organs that secrete hormones, and then your adrenal glands are found on top of each kidney. Now, the aldosterone, what is it going to do now? After it has been stimulated and secreted, it is going to increase the reabsorption of sodium ions from the renal tubules in the kidneys into the surrounding blood vessels. Now, when you look, okay, let's go back. Okay. Yeah. When we look at this diagram here, we see that which renal tubules are we talking about? Which ones are going to now be increased by aldosterone to increase the permeability of them? It is actually your proximal convoluted tubule, your distal convoluted tubule, and your loop of Henle. So these are the renal tubules that we are referring to when we say aldosterone is going now to increase the permeability there of the renal tubules, these ones that we are talking about here. Now the salt levels, okay, when the renal tubules have increased the reabsorption now of sodium ions, the salt level in the blood vessels will then increase, meaning that low salt level that was detected has now come to normal, which is the last step. Right. Let's go to the next one. What happens now when the salt level in the blood increases, meaning you have eaten your packet of chips with more salt in them, and your body does not want that because it wants you to eat normal range of salt. So what is going to happen? Your salt level in the blood is going to increase, and then the receptor cells in the afferent and the efferent. Remember, when we're dealing with salt, who is going to, or which parts are going to detect the imbalance? It is actually your afferent and your efferent arterioles of the kidneys. They are going to detect the high salt levels, and then they are going to stimulate the adrenal gland. The adrenal glands on top of your kidneys. The adrenal glands, when they are stimulated, they are going to secrete hormone aldosterone. This hormone aldosterone is going to stop. In fact, no. They are going to stop the secretion of hormone aldosterone, or they are going to secrete less aldosterone. Remember, we don't want we don't want the reabsorption of the salt into our blood because there's already more salt, so we want less actually. Hence, aldosterone is going to decrease the reabsorption of sodium ions from the renal tubules into the surrounding blood vessels, and then the salt level in the blood vessels then will decrease, then returning to normal. I think that makes sense. Just to recap on the things that you needed to highlight there. What detects the imbalance? Your afferent and your efferent arterioles, and they are going to stimulate what? Your adrenal gland to secrete the hormone aldosterone. Then depending on the situation, the adrenal gland will secrete more aldosterone, or it will secrete less aldosterone. So this is another diagram explaining the same thing. We are not going to go through this because I have shown you on the previous diagram on how to interpret a schematic diagram like this. You go from here, go here, go there, go there. You follow your arrows, and then also from here, you come here, you go there, and then you check everything up until it's back to normal. So this is the same thing that we have already been talking about. Then you can just go through this when you find time. Right. Remember another thing that we mentioned, that the kidney plays a role in osmoregulation, in the regulation of pH, and also the regulation of salt. So we have done salt, we've done water. Now we're going to check how does the kidney maintain the balance of pH. Remember, pH is the pH scale. When you look at this diagram here, it shows us our pH scale in grade 10. When we come across this, and those who are doing physical sciences are more familiar with the pH scale, we know that when the pH of a substance is at 7, when it is anything or any number below 6, it is acidic. And then when it's a number above 7 to 14, it is going to be alkaline. So we used to call them a base, but now they are alkaline. So now the distal convoluted tubule is the one that plays a role. Remember your distal convoluted tubule? When I said take note of the nephron, take note of the part, because I knew we were going to talk about the distal convoluted tubule more and more. But I think now everyone knows when I'm talking about the distal convoluted tubule, which part I'm referring to. So when on your, towards your right, before your collecting duct, that convoluted tubule there at the top, that is the distal convoluted tubule. Distal convoluted tubule, only that is the one that plays a role in maintaining the pH of the blood. Remember, you don't want your blood to be too acidic. You don't want your blood to be too alkaline. You want your blood to be within normal range. So how does the distal convoluted tubule work or maintain the balance of pH in the blood? So it is the one that is responsible for the take-up of hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions, meaning in everything that you eat, everything that you consume, all the hydrogen ions or the bicarbonate ions are going to be absorbed by the distal convoluted tubule, and then it is going to detect, or it is going to tell us how your blood is going to be. Now let us look at the first scenario in here. What happens if your blood has low pH? Remember, from the pH scale is here, we said when the pH is low, it is actually acidic, meaning what happens if your blood is acidic? So there is low pH in the blood due to high hydrogen ions. So the high hydrogen ions in your blood will be the one that makes your blood to be too acidic. And now this is going to be maintained how? The hydrogen ions are going to move from blood in the peritubular capillaries and into the distal convoluted tubule, and then less hydrogen ions in the blood will mean that the pH will return to the normal of 7.4. So we want our pH to be around 7.4. So we want our distal convoluted tubule to have less hydrogen ions. So now it is going to absorb less hydrogen ions so that our blood pH is 7.4. So here nothing more is controlled. It's only just nothing much is happening. It's only just the distal convoluted tubule absorbing or reabsorbing the hydrogen ions. Now, when there is high pH due to high bicarbonate ions concentration, what is happening? What happens now? Because sometimes when the pH is too high, when your blood is too alkaline, we don't want that. You want your blood to be around the pH of 7.4, so around here. So you don't want it to be at 13 or 12. So when your blood pH is here, the bicarbonate ions are going to move from the blood capillaries into the peritubular capillaries and into the distal convoluted tubule, and then meaning there's going to be less bicarbonate ions in the blood, meaning they're going to move from the blood into your distal convoluted tubule. And then why do we say it's going to cost less? Because the distal convoluted tubule is connected to the collecting duct. So if something gets into the distal convoluted tubule, it is going to be collected by the collecting duct and it's going to be passed out with urine. So now we are reducing the bicarbonate ions through the distal convoluted tubules just by active transport from the blood into the distal convoluted tubules and then into the collecting duct, and then thus maintaining less bicarbonate ions in your blood. Then your pH will then go back to normal. The same as with your hydrogen ions. If there's too much hydrogen ions in your blood, the distal convoluted tubule is going to reabsorb them from the blood and then take them to the collecting duct, and then they are going to be passed out with urine. Then that's maintaining your pH of the blood. I think that one is simple and it's very straightforward, does not require any more information. You just need to know the part is the distal convoluted tubule and which ions are responsible for low pH and which ions are responsible for high pH. Right, so we're going to look at the question here. It's based on salt, okay, but let us go through the question. The question says here, the diagrams below show the reabsorption of salt and water through the tubules of a nephron in the kidney under 3 different conditions. The width of the arrows represents the amount of salt and water. So when they say the width of arrows, so if you can take a look at this arrow, is a bit narrow. I mean, it's a bit wide. This one is a bit narrow. This is wide. This is narrow, wide, narrow. So that is what they're talking about. Then when you look there, there's diagram 1. See, there's reabsorption, renal tubules. You try to study your diagram before you even go to your questions. You study what is happening here. So you see, this is what coming in here is your glomerular filtrate with salt and water. Then you're going to see how much is going to be reabsorbed into the tubules, and then how much is going to go to the bladder, how much is going to go out. Then here, but then how do you know here which one is which one is salt, which one is water? You must come to the key here. The key says the black one represents salt, the gray one represents water. So then you will check what is happening in diagram number 2 as well, what is coming out, what is being reabsorbed, same as with diagram number 3. So going to the questions quickly. Name the hormone in human body that is responsible for controlling the water content. So I think that one we have covered it. So water content and the salt content. Water content is controlled by hormone ADH. The salt content is controlled by hormone aldosterone. Now, name the gland that secretes the hormone in question 1b. So aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal glands on top of each kidney. Remember we spoke about that. And then which diagram, 1, 2, or 3, would represent a person who has eaten salty chips on a hot day without any intake of water? So with this person, what do you expect? You expect this person to have more salt in their blood, so no water. So just without any further ado, let's check. This is person 3. So when you check person 3, what is reabsorbed more is water, and then to the urinary bladder or to the collecting duct, you will see that there's more salt going out. So that explains why we say person 3. Now this is another diagram, but I'm not going to go through this. Your teacher will also go through this diagram with you, or this question with you. I want to quickly go to another part as we are done with the kidney. Just want to look at the skin. Right. So we have checked how the kidney plays a role in maintaining balance of salt, of water, of pH. So now we're going to look at how does our skin now regulate temperature. Another thing that needs to be regulated is our temperature. So, which is, okay, let us look at the term thermoregulation. What does thermoregulation mean first? So this is the term thermoregulation. Remember, terminology is very important. So thermoregulation is the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature within certain limits, even when the external temperature changes. So we as human beings, when you take a look at this person is exposed to heat on the external, this one is exposed to cold or cold conditions on the external. But the internal temperature must be maintained at constant levels at all times. So this is what thermoregulation is talking about. So we as humans are endothermic animals, and then we are able to maintain our body or the internal body temperature at about 36.8 degrees Celsius, even when the temperature outside our body is extremely low or extremely high. So this is what thermoregulation is talking about. So as human beings, we lose heat in so many different ways, but the one that we are going to study for grade 12 is thermoregulation. What is thermoregulation? Okay, we can lose heat through radiation, evaporation, conduction, when two surfaces are there, precipitation, this is radiation. So there are so many ways to lose heat, but with the grade 12 syllabi or the exam guideline, it wants you to know how our body loses heat through the skin. So we're going to look at that. This is a diagram of the skin. So like we did with the kidney, we're going to look at the important parts that play a role in maintaining our body temperature with the skin. So this is the external structure of the skin. So we're going to look at here. When you look here, you see your blood vessels, then you see your sweat glands, and then your receptors. Remember, receptors are very important in detecting the imbalance. And then you have on the surface of the skin, you have your sweat pores, and then you have your hairs. Sometimes they're called cilia or hair, or yes, there. So your sweat gland is going to play a very important role, and your sweat pores. So these are the parts that you need to look at when we do thermoregulation. So the human skin is the largest organ in the body, and it has thermoreceptors. Now the receptors here, remember with water we said the receptors are called osmoregulators, and then with the skin, with temperature now, they are called thermoregulation, thermoreceptors. Thermoreceptors are the receptors which respond to either hot or cold. So the skin has those types of receptors. So here you cannot be talking about the osmo, but rather the thermoregulators. Please take note of that. Then, how does our skin maintain the temperature through or on a hot day? Remember, we need to maintain that constant temperature. So the skin is the organ that is going to play a role in maintaining that internal temperature, irrespective of what is happening on the external. Now, let us take a look on the first scenario. So with negative feedback, we have already established there are always two scenarios. So the first one here is going to take a look at the skin under the conditions of hot. Like what happens on a hot day? On a hot day, the hypothalamus is stimulated to send the impulse to the blood vessels. So what does it do? The blood vessels are going to, the hypothalamus, remember, this is in your brain. It is stimulated to send impulses to the blood vessels. So the message is going to go to the blood vessels to say it's hot. Now, what are the blood vessels going to do? Or what effect is that going to have on the blood vessels? It is now going to cause the blood vessels to dilate, or to cause the blood vessels to become wider. When the blood vessels become wider, we call this vasodilation, meaning they have become dilated. They are more wider. More wider, what does it mean? It means more blood is going to flow through the skin, and then more heat is going to be lost from the skin. Then more blood is going to be sent to the sweat glands, and then the sweat glands are now going to do what? To be stimulated to release more sweat. And then when more sweat is released, it is going to evaporate. When sweat comes throughout the sweat, the pores of the skin here, the evaporation, remember there's air outside, and then it's going to evaporate. That's cooling the skin. So this was on a hot day. But on a cold day, we need to wrap up quickly. On a cold day, what happens? The hypothalamus is also going to stimulate the blood vessels now also to become what? To become narrow. Now look, the blood vessels are now narrow. The blood vessels here were thicker. Now the blood vessels, when they are narrow, we call them, they have constricted. When they have constricted, that condition, we call it vasoconstriction. When they are constricted, it means there's less blood flow in the blood vessels, and then less heat is going to be lost through the skin, and then less blood is going to be sent to the sweat glands, and then the sweat glands is going to become less active, meaning there's nothing happening with the sweat glands. It is not releasing sweat, therefore the skin, there's no evaporation, there's nothing that is cooling the skin on top. The skin remains warm. So this is what happens on a cold day. You need your skin to be warm. Right, so these are the questions. You can go through these questions with your teacher. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to cover the questions, but you can go through. The teachers have these presentations. They are going to go through these with you. And then with that, I would like to say thank you for watching, and please remember to sanitize and wear your mask and keep safe. And also, while doing that, you must study. Your prelims are just around the corner. I know you must have written your life sciences paper already, but it does not mean you must relax. You start today. You start covering those topics that you revise the topics that you've covered for the prelims, and then you wait for the upcoming topics, or you prepare ahead for the upcoming topics for term 3. You have your exam guideline. Remember, your exam guideline is your scope. Please remember, sanitize, wear your mask, and keep safe. Thank you. Thank you so for watching.